Hello, everyone. It was requested that I talk about the S87, so I'm going to do that by going into more detail about why I dislike the Grau, and then talk about underrated weapons. Okay, so I dislike the Grau because of two reasons. One being game design, and the other being just the way it is. If you create something in a game that is so easy to use to a point where a player is not learning a core skill of the game, such as recoil control, micromanagement, um, or any one of the other things that I can list, then you have failed as a game designer. All weapons in any game should always have a drawback strong enough to where it encourages a certain playstyle for that weapon, thus encouraging people to experiment and try other things. But because the Grau is so easy, you don't have all of that going on. Now, I'm not placing all of the blame on the developers themselves. I recognize that this is a twofold problem. The other half of the problem is in the player base itself. The vast majority of the Call of Duty community are a bunch of sheep. They will follow the quote unquote pros all the way. They refuse to take the time out of their day to learn for themselves. And that's just tragic to see. If you want to be ahead of the game, then you need to learn the game. That includes any fundamental skills that are part of it, the mechanics and whatnot. And no, it's not sweaty to learn that. I get so tired of people telling me when I say things like this that it's sweaty to do that. It's not sweaty. Learning the game is part of every game. Uh, if you don't learn the game, then what's the point in playing the game if you're just going to be a mindless sheep, right? You should play the game to the fullest. That means actually giving your best, having fun, and learning. They're all cores of every single game, not just Call of Duty. So, yeah, I don't like the Grau for a game development reason, and also just because of the fact that it really doesn't have that good. Well, I should say it doesn't have a good number set. I mean, sure, it can kill somebody, but it's not going to be as efficient as some of the other guns in the game. So it's more or less just a lazy person's weapon. That's really all there is to it. Now, people are going to probably come up in the comments and tell me, oh, what about the MP7 and Kilo? Well, the good news is that the Kilo, while it does have very good recoil control, it's balanced in the respect that its recoil pattern is different. Most people are used to these kinds of guns where the um, recoil is mostly vertical. But the Kilo is not like that. The Kilo goes up and then to the left, which is something people aren't used to. Um, the only thing that people are used to outside of a straight vertical recoil pattern is up and to the right, which is what the M4 does. So while the Kilo does have a much better recoil control than the Grau, it's up and to the left, which people aren't used to. So you're not going to find too many people using it. For that reason, and also because of people being sheep. Because they refuse to learn for themselves, they refuse to see the opportunities in other guns. But yeah, that's kind of the problem with this. As far as the other one, the MP7, I get a feeling that somebody's going to comment about this one too. The reason I'm not worried about the MP7 is because it's an idiot trap. That's essentially what it is. You'll notice that its range is super short. It takes a recon barrel plus a monolithic suppressor to get to the range of the MP5. The MP5 can get to 14.06 meters on just the monolithic integral suppressor barrel. It only needs one attachment to do that. But the MP7, to reach 14.06, needs two attachments, which slow down its ADS so much that there's no point in doing the MP7. Not only that, um, I see people trying to use the MP7 like an AR, and they're trying to shoot people at these distances where the red and teal bars are. This is why I call it an idiot trap, because people refuse to learn the game for themselves. They don't understand that it doesn't matter if you can, quote unquote, laser somebody at that distance. Your time to kill is so slowed down that all it takes is that one person to be aware of you being an idiot and shut you down. It's not going to be that hard when you have a longer range gun against an MP7. So yeah, idiot trap. That's what I call it. Okay, now that I've gotten my little rant out of my system, let's go ahead and talk about underrated weapons. Perhaps one of the most underrated guns is the Dragunov itself. People pick up things on the ground and then don't use it properly or refuse to give it a chance, like we've seen with the AK. The Dragunov is under the same problem. And another thing, too, is that I think the game developers are partly to blame for that. The Dragunov should not have the amount of recoil it does for its base. You can see it here. This should not be the recoil of a DMR. It should not. You can see even the EBR-14 does that a little bit better. So, yeah, the Dragunov is a bit of a problem when it comes to recoil, and that is on the devs. But at the same time, it's also on the players to understand that you need to fully build a gun before you can truly see it shine. As for the Dragunov, in order for it to truly shine, it needs the 660mm barrel, because not only is it the range for it, but it's also part of its recoil control. The other thing, too, that you really need with the Dragunov is either a compensator or bipod after the 660mm barrel. You need a lot of recoil control to make it sure that you're able to use its full RPM. People are going to probably wonder why it's worth going through this much trouble. For starters, its effective range is very far. It's 78 meters in total. There isn't very many guns that have an effective range that far out. That means that the Dragunov is not only longer range than most guns in the game, but it's also very high damaging. Look at this right here. The Dragunov is an upper torso damage of 136. To put that in perspective, the total HP maximum for Warzone, once you factor in base health plus armor plates, is 250. That means it takes 2 shots from a Dragunov to knock somebody. When you're talking about a semi-auto like this, it's not hard to get the 2 shots. Especially when you're talking about you have this entire section of red to work with. The Dragunov is by far the best long-range semi-auto in the game for people that aren't able to hit the head. If you're able to hit the head consistently, then you should be using the HDR or AX50. Although the HDR does have higher bullet velocity than the AX50, so it'll be a lot easier to do it. The AX50 only has RPM going for it, but otherwise its bullet velocity is actually slower than the Dragunov. But yeah, so Dragunov is heavily underrated. Let's go and talk about the SA-7 now, seeing as that was requested. The SA-7 is a phenomenal gun. Even though it's an LMG, it's still a phenomenal gun. You'll notice that its base range is going to be closer to 50 meters, about 46 meters from what I'm able to tell. That means without a barrel attachment, it is near Grau Archangel range. Okay, that's insanity. That's even longer range than the base of these LMGs. Look at how far back the green bar is for the Bruin. Look how far back the green bar is for the PKM. The PKM's all the way over here by 37.5 meters. The SA-7's all the way over here by 50. And on top of the insane range, it's also very forgiving. Look at the damage zone it has. It's the entire torso plus stomach. Then it has the head. That's completely different from the Bruin and PKM, which share the same scheme of upper torso and head. While we're at it, look at this. The upper torso damage for the Bruin, and of course the PKM, is going to be 34 at its effective range. look at the effective range damage for the SA-7. It's 34 to the entire torso. Because it has such a large torso multiplication range, that means the recoil should never be a problem for you. You aim really low for the stomach and you let the recoil rise up until you start getting to about here, and then you control it. From there, just knock the person down. Oh yeah, I forgot that I didn't put the SA-7's recoil pattern here, but it's fine. The SA-7 is pretty much similar to the Grau's recoil pattern, in which it's just straight up. A couple other things to point out too about the SA-7 is that it's been buffed 4 times over the course of it being in the game. It's an original gun. It's been with the game since the start. But in the course of the 4 buffs, it's received a recoil reduction. It had its attachments fixed because for some weird reason its attachments weren't registering properly in terms of the numbers. It's had damage buffs, and then its final buff was with the bolt's delay. The SA-7 originally had a 180 millisecond open bolt delay, but that was completely removed in the patch that brought in the Bruin. That means the SA-7 is, besides the Bruin, are the only 2 LMGs without a delay. The PKM does have an open bolt delay of only 50 milliseconds, so it really isn't the worst, but it's still something to keep in mind when dealing with that. Yeah, so it's received a lot of buffs. Perhaps another good number to point out is the standard sprint out time. Standard sprint out time is the time it takes for you to ready your gun after leaving a full sprint. The SA-7 has near AR standard sprint out time, making it very unique from the rest of the LMGs. All the other LMGs have very slow standard sprint out times, and in some cases slow movement speed, but the SA-7 is neither. It has very good standard sprint out time, and because it doesn't need a barrel, it sits at 90% movement speed once you slap on a 50 round magazine. So yeah, there's just so many reasons why you should be using an SA-7. Some of the other underrated guns I think should be pointed out is the Ram 7. I've brought this up in my best guns of Warzone recording. I've mentioned it numerous times over recordings, but the Ram 7 really is a phenomenal gun. It's extremely versatile in terms of the attachments. It can handle a wide range of situations, and even when it has its XRK Ranger barrel in, you can still use it as an SMG, assuming that you understand the timing of it. Because the RPM and DPS and time to kill are so fast, it can win in close quarter situations. It will likely not win against MP5, but it does have a chance of doing it. It will certainly have a better chance of competing with the MP5 in close quarters than, say, the MP7. So there's that. But yeah, I don't think I really need to mention too much more about the Ram 7, given that I've talked about it numerous times. Yeah, I think that's really the only underrated guns that I can think of, because realistically, there's not a whole lot of guns that are truly good for Warzone. Warzone is just too large of a map to really use any guns besides a marksman / sniper or an AR. I guess you could use the P90, but it's just so short ranged. It's going to be really hard to do it. But yeah, I guess if you did want SMG, I would say use the P90. That's very underrated. I don't have it pulled up, but P90 is very capable of range. As a matter of fact, you can bring it up to around 20 meters range once you add the 10.6 inch barrel and monolithic suppressor, which would put it towards the M4's range, because you can see the base range is just a hair past 25 meters, which puts it at probably about 26 or 27 meters. I haven't checked recently. Ram's about that as well. But yeah, 20 meters is fairly close to AR range. So think of the P90 as an AR more than an SMG. It's a very mobile AR is what you have to view it as. Um, its time to kill is going to be slower though than the M4. Its time to kill sits at 585 milliseconds on 3 armor plates. M4's is going to be 576. SA7 is going to be 582. That means that the P90 is 3 milliseconds slower than SA7 and 9 milliseconds slower than an M4. However, it does use SMG ammo, so I guess that's kind of the trade-off there. But that's really all I have for today. Thanks for listening.